All right, let's talk about our top story this morning, and that is inflation numbers just coming out a few moments ago. So we've got to get to this, and it's not good. This is a 40-year high. This is the Consumer Price Index, so the CPI. This is the measure of your stuff, the stuff that you buy, gas prices, goods, services, all of that stuff. And here is the new number that just came out just a few moments ago, and this is a 40-year high.
So this number indicates that the same things that you purchased at this time last year were 7.5% cheaper. We all freaked out in December when the number came out at 7%, but it just kept going. So now it's 7.5%. However, keep in mind that over the last month, the number is only 0.6%. So you were already paying 7%. This is a little over 0.5% more than the month before. So if you thought things would get easier on your budget, no. They got harder.
And gas prices particularly.
Right. Gas prices are now $3.47 per gallon. That's a national average. So you know that some places in the country are much, much higher, inching towards $5 in some of the expensive suburbs of California, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. But beyond gas, this is, of course, relatable to everything, particularly your groceries.
Yeah, so gas prices are expected to go and stay at basically twice as high. Americans are paying about twice as much as gasoline for now as they were early in the pandemic, and that's going to continue according to data this morning. This is going to continue to be a costly thing for you as a family. And it's interesting, too, when you look at what the Wall Street Journal kind of paints a picture as to how much this is costing you per month. To kind of put this in perspective, the Wall Street Journal broke this down. Higher inflation is probably costing you $250 a month. $250 a month.
I mean, that is extra out-of-pocket cost, right? But it does not actually account for how much your dollar is worth, right?
Well, it doesn't consider like how many, that just seems really low to me compared to probably the average household. I mean, is that per person or?
Is that per person? Yeah, I'm interested in this number. Is this per person or per day?
Okay, so let's look at this.
Because it's not the fact that you can buy, is it that you can buy $250 less of goods, or you have to, you know what I mean?
So I'll answer that.
Okay.
So according to the data, they figured this out by comparing what the average household spent under 7% inflation. So now it's above 7%. What did you spend below 7% versus the amount that it would have spent when inflation was 2.1%? That was the average back in 2018. Not that long ago, by the way, and 2019. Prices for certain goods and services jumped more than prices for others, which means people who paid for those things probably have suffered a bigger inflation burden than those who didn't. Any consumers unlucky enough to have needed a new washing machine might have taken a bigger hit compared with others from inflation because laundry equipment prices leapt 12%. So, if you adjust for these things, but I think this graph out of this data is really the most telling. Look at this. Who does it hit the most? Well, it doesn't hit, it's interesting. It doesn't hit white people as much as it hits Black, Hispanic, Latino.
How is that possible?
How can that be? Because they have the salary to keep up with it, or because they're
paying the same prices where they go.
They buy are more expensive.
Middle class households were squeezed harder than other groups, with prices up 6% in December. So those things like middle class households spend a bigger share of their budgets than others do on gasoline.
So the y-axis there is budgets, is like percent of household.
Mm-hmm. Like higher earning households spent relatively more on dining out and recreation, which rose much less.
That can't be, because you can't be telling me that the average Black family spends less than 8% of their income. And then what? The other 92% is disposable income? That can't be. So it must be that the things they buy have inflated more?
Consumer price inflation by race and ethnicity.
But if the prices are going up everywhere, it would affect everyone buying anything. So that makes no sense to me how it could be separated by race.
Or
other
specifically,
than class.
Yeah, I want to look at that closer. I did not read what you're reading.
It's in the Wall Street Journal, front page of the Wall Street Journal. Everyone can dial it in if they like. Here's the graph: consumer price inflation by race and ethnicity, and so that's how the breakdown is. And as they as they point out in this piece, I think it's interesting is that, prices for certain goods jumped more than other prices for goods, and certain goods are, lower income and middle class families buy more of, and again, shifting the burden, as it says, which means people who paid for those things probably had suffered a bigger inflation burden than those who didn't. So again, any consumer unlucky enough, as they point out, to have needed to get a washing machine or those types of things, paying more. Also, some groups on average more than others. The Consumer Price Index reflects the change in prices for the average basket of spending, but people's spending baskets varied based on who they are. Which
okay.
Right, which influences to some degree their daily needs, where they live, how they get around. So here's the thing, right? If you're one of those well-to-do people, right, you work from home, you have a laptop, and you're just paying for internet service, and you don't have to get in a car and drive to work, then you're not as affected as someone who's going to pay a lot more in gasoline because they have to commute 2 hours every day. Right?
You have a nice farmer's market in your, in your city center or in your little town village, right? If you've never sought out this TED Talk, I really suggest it, by Ron Finlay, I think is his name, the gangster gardener. And he talks about how living in inner city Los Angeles meant that he had to drive an hour and a half to get an organic apple, right? Because all the food, and in fact, there are demography studies that prove this quite easily, is that if you live in urban centers that are full of minority populations, you have less access to fresh food, and you have faster and easier access to things that are unhealthy and packaged. This is it's easily proven, right? If you're in inner city LA, you can go and get some fast food that's 99 cents, but it's not good for you. If you want to seek out healthier products that are not packaged, it's far away from you. So it would stand to reason that people of color who live in poorer neighborhoods have their goods and services rising because they are more dependent on things that are packaged, if that's what we're saying.
Iris Ramos in our chat says not everyone who works from home is well-to-do, and not at all, exactly. And I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is, though, that if you don't have to spend all of that extra money on gasoline,
it's not going to hurt you as much.
And if the gasoline prices are continuing to stay as high as they are, and they're going to be sticking around for quite a while, this demand for oil is outstripping supply. And again, and then if we have what's happening in Russia and Ukraine and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and further constraints on oil and gas, it's going to be even more difficult before it gets better. I should point out, too, if we look at how this is all broken down, those who are 35 to 44 saw their costs rise 6.9% in 2021, higher than any other age group, which is interesting. So if you're 34 or 35 years old up to 44 years old, those areas where you spend are much higher.
I think that's the population that's more likely to have children, that age group. And so that would make sense that their expenses, if you have small kids at home, would be higher. It's definitely more costly to take care of people.
I mean, then I wish cars
I wish those graphs would focus more on the real thing, which is class rather than race, because it's just this is affecting classes of people,
Yeah, and they just don't break that down as well. I mean, that's the problem. They do for, I guess, if you look at specifically household income, then maybe they will. But for the most part, they're looking at skin color.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, and I don't know. It just makes it, because again, it's it makes it look like all white people are just hey, this is fine, we don't care.
Yeah.
If you listen, it's just that's the narrative that they try to paint, that us white people we're doing just fine.
Let me just show you this graph. I think this is really interesting. So I pulled this out as a separate here. So look on the left side of your screen here. This is 1982, right? That's the last time we've seen inflation this high. So left side of your screen, 1982. Okay, inflation goes down. Look what happens in the Great Recession, right? The housing crisis. Look how, and then we go into negative interest rates, right? We go into negative inflation because the Federal Reserve kept it artificially low and never really let the economy recover, right?
Yes.
Never let us bleed as the way that we should have. All these big banks, it artificially propped it up. So look at that. I mean, that's a really telling moment there where you can see the Fed's intervention in this.
Yes.
And keeps it artificially low for years. Of course it was going to burst at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And now it is.
As Tom Wheelwright likes to say, we took ourselves out of the economy by creating money and spending money like crazy. And then we never went to pay it back the way maybe a household would if it had taken on this much debt. We just kept creating money,
Right.
And keeping ourselves in this bubble, in this like you're on drugs, like you've been taking pain pills for 10 years not to feel the effect of the injury. And now we are all feeling the effect of the injury. And some economists say it has to do with the what Walmart, Amazon, China, the WAC problem, right? Because China can build products cheaply, ship them to us, and we buy them through Walmart and Amazon, and we don't really know what the price of goods are, what they are on the economy, what they are like. We don't buy things that are made in our own country. Our dependence on foreign imports has made it so that we think that we can have these cheap goods, and now we realize there may not really be such a thing as cheap goods.
Yeah, it's really, really sad.
Yeah. I don't think it's our problem. I've been thinking about this a lot, though. Like the study that was in the newsletter last week about how if you give people a choice of like all kinds of meat on a menu, they will choose meat, right? But if you make the menu 75% vegetarian, they will just choose vegetarian. People don't think that they are entitled to meat 3 times a day. It's just what's put on us. And I think you can extrapolate that to all products. Like a lot of times you go somewhere, this is the Target effect, right? And you're like, oh, I just need a Tylenol or something. And you come out with like grocery bags of stuff you didn't even know you need. I don't know, there's something about the human psychology of it. It's all there. It's all pretty cheap, and you think, well, I can put that to use, so I'll just buy it. I feel like we shouldn't blame ourselves so much because, you know?
Yeah, I mean, think about the advertising. I know, David, you talk about minimalism, right? I mean, this is a thing when we downsized and moved to Europe, like sold everything, got rid of like clothing, went through our closets and realized like, oh my gosh, why did I have this stuff?
Yeah.
Why do I have these? I wear the same like 4 shirts. Why do I have 15 shirts? Like I wear, why do we need this crap?
We just kind of think we do. It's a mentality of when you go into a mall or a, and you're surrounded by things that are cheap, and especially when you've got a family, you're like, I can use this, I can use this, I can use this. And then I don't know, I really do think that in the next 5 years, our consumeristic ways are just not going to be supported anymore by a perverted economy or supply chains anymore. And you see the planet breaking down, the story this morning about weed killer and how 40% of Americans have toxins in their body from weed killer is really crazy, right? And
Thanks,
I think that
Monsanto.
we're going to come to
Roundup.
a point where it's so interesting. I was reading this book about rewilding, and she talks about how farmers, they don't even necessarily use weed killer in any kind of like bloom season. They just use it as a blanket, and it kills worms, which are better for crops than, they're better for crops than weeds are detrimental. It kills it kills the soil. It kills the mycorrhiza, I think is how you say it. I've never heard it out loud. I've only read it, which is like the fungal system that allows plants and animals to talk to each other. And it's just really bad. And you can use natural products like compost tea that are cheaper and more effective. Then you don't need to do this, right? But it's like we always take a hammer to any kind of delicate job. I just think all of these things together are going to come to a point where we won't be able to live this way any longer. And I don't know what it's going to look like. Hopefully it's not dystopian.
It's going to look like,
feels like
it's
that.
going to look like the movie WALL-E. I mean, that's what it's,
Yeah.
like we're all going to be sitting there, and that's where we're heading, And
I
so
mean, when
we've
you go out to any like grocery store or whatever, and you see the people and just like the weight problems and stuff that we have in this country because we're such consumers of whatever, food is popular for the moment, and we don't think about health and stuff. And it's like, when we talk about the pandemic and how many people could have been helped if they would just promote healthy eating. You look at all these other countries that promote healthy eating, and they're less civilized than we are, and they eat so much better.
If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership program. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism just by going to morninginvest.com/join.
You get access to exclusive videos, plus the ability to join and chat with us live. We really appreciate your subscription, and you are supporting independent journalism.